and welcome to the very last day of the National Youth Film and Animation School. So this afternoon we are joined by the very dapper, well-suited Alan Slattery.
Very happy to be here.
Yes, it probably feels like it's a home from home.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been here in about years since I've been here, but hasn't changed. Still the very same.
Yeah, same old, same old. And would you introduce us to what it is that you do exactly?
Well, my name is Alan Slattery. I work in Cartoon Saloon. I'm an editor there. I'm one of the editors. We have 4 or 5 editors. And I'm also the post-production supervisor in the studio as well. And yeah, that's me.
Cool. And what does the role of a post-production supervisor entail?
What doesn't it entail, really? Well, because I'm doing a lot of editing, so I'll be working with directors and production managers and production assistants on the on getting all the production stuff together. But I suppose my main role will be kind of like overseeing the workflow that we use in the studio, so that we're working consistently and that like everything. Yeah, just making sure that everything kind of works consistently is to the right technical standard, depending on what production we're working on and the tech spec for that.
Yeah, cool.
So it's a bit of a fun job. It's kind of, there's not a lot of technical aspects to it, but it can be it's always the creative aspects to it as well, and lots of admin stuff too.
Yeah, and is it the right balance for you, I suppose, between the nitty gritty practicalities of it alongside that creative space?
It is, alright, yeah, because like, while I love the creative end of things, I still, the technical end of things is what I really, really love. I love working with like digital video and digital audio, and yeah, there's a nice balance between the two there, so it's great.
Yeah. Could you bring us down the wonderful storyline of how it is, like, were you interested in school, and how did that transition then to your further study in the area?
Well, what happened was, excuse me, I joined the Young Irish Filmmakers in '91.
We did not pay him to say that.
Yeah, so that was like 29 years ago now. I joined Young Irish Filmmakers, and I joined originally as an actor, and I was doing the acting course for about 6 months, maybe a year, and then I was told that I wasn't the best actor and that maybe I should pick up a camera and play with that for a while. So I tried camera operation. That was great fun. I really enjoyed that. And then we shot loads of videos, but we don't want to edit them. So I decided, look, I'll just sit down and learn how to use the edit suite. So we had 2 VHS machines and 2 TVs and a little small little mixer in between. So we were kind of playing the tape, recording over on this side, and it was a good learning process for me, because I wasn't jumping in using computers straight away. I was learning actually how tape-to-tape editing works, you know what I mean? And kind of, that's a very slow process, because if you make a mistake 3 shots back, you have to go back and redo it all again. There's no like, well, with more equipment you could do insert edits, but we didn't have any of that kind of equipment back in those days. So that was good for me to learn like I suppose the mechanics of editing. And then I went off to college in, what year was that, 2001? And I studied TV and media production over there in England. Came back, started working in Young Irish Filmmakers again. Yes. And then Cartoon Saloon were based in the room beside us. So I was hanging out with them. I was kind of going in, seeing what they were doing, and they were kind of coming in to me to get some little bits and bobs done editing-wise. And then that kind of sparked me interest in animation. I wasn't interested in animation before that. My main thing was editing. I loved editing. I just loved, filmmaking, editing were my main things. But then when I discovered animation, I was like, okay, this seems like a lot more interesting, a lot more up my alley. Because it's a good balance between the creative side and the technical side, I think. Yeah,
a nice kind of like yin and yang.
Exactly,
to it.
yeah, absolutely.
And did you like, I suppose for me, like demystifying it, so you had done so much live action, was there anything that drew you to animation as like something else to play around with? Because I imagine it was was it different from like an editing standpoint?
Absolutely. With animation, we do the editing beforehand. So we're editing the film before it gets animated. So we're working with storyboards, we're working with like still images initially, and we're editing that, we're putting in sound effects, timing it all out. We're actually making a full film before the film is made. So that aspect of it I found very interesting, the fact that you could play around with these things, that you could actually, you weren't stuck with whatever was storyboarded or whatever the writer did or whatever the director envisaged, but you could actually go in and change these things. And make the scene, you know, your own and make it a little bit better, you know what I mean, by just moving things around. And you have that control over animation, which you don't have in live action.
Yeah.
So, but that gives you more pressure to make things right then, so you can't have, there's no excuses, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do a shout out to any of the young people watching. If you do have any questions for Alan, we can probe him with whatever you throw at us. But being in like Young Irish Filmmakers when you were younger, I suppose that was a new space to experiment your kind of creative output with other people, to be like, oh, we're going to experiment, because obviously when it comes to the editing side, you need your content to play around with.
Yeah.
How important was that to you when you were growing up, to be working alongside so many other creative young people?
No, it was very important, right? Because I suppose like by the time I was like 14, 15, I was shooting on professional equipment, editing on professional equipment, and like no other kids that I knew had that, other than like my circle of friends.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this like really unique opportunity and kind of place to do this thing, like, which is great. What was the question again, sir?
It was like how important it was
important
for
was
like
it?
to
Yes.
have a group of people to work alongside.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was very important because like an awful lot of things grew from Young Irish Filmmakers, from the previous groups that were here. There was like microfilms, devious theatre, cartoon saloon, just to name a few, you know what I mean? So it was very important for us to actually, as young people, get together and kind of meet and actually share ideas, share information, share knowledge, most importantly. Like we were teaching each other how to use things, how to shoot something, how to use a camera, how to edit certain things in certain ways. Plus we were able to experiment. Like as you said, we were taking our cameras every day, we were making a short film every day. And I say a short film, we were making a short video every day, and we were putting it together then at like 6 o'clock in the evening when our mammies were ringing us to tell us to go home for a dinner, that kind of thing. But it meant that like every day we were learning something new. Even if it was something small, we were learning something new every day. So that was great.
Cool. And when it moved to, could you dissect that role of what you're doing now a little bit more, and where it fits within the production line of things within any studio, cartoon saloon where you are now?
Yeah.
What is it, and who are you speaking with
As
most?
an editor, I suppose.
Yes.
Well, I suppose the editor's role starts pretty early on in animation, because you'll be working with as soon as there's a script ready to go, that would be sent over to a storyboard artist to start doing up like preliminary drawings and storyboards. So I'd be getting involved at that early stage, bringing in the storyboard panels or the animation, the very rough animation that would be done up, assembling it in an edit suite, and working with the director at that early stage before they even record the voices, before any of that stuff is done. We're in there, we're editing the film. So actually, the editors and the production assistants usually have to record all the voices ourselves. So we're sitting there with microphones with the script.
Way.
Yeah, for Puff and Rock, I played Baba and Una more times than I care to remember, to be honest with you. But that's the way you do it. I mean, you go in there and we all sit down and we record it. But that means then that we're getting a feeling for the rhythm, for the timing, for how everything works. You know what I mean? So that when we go in to record the actors, we're not going to go, can you give us a few different various takes? We're kind of going, this is what we want. And the actors obviously will do their own interpretation of it, but like we're not fiddling around with different lines or kind of making up as we go on the spot or in the studio. We're not kind of like really working it there. We're kind of working it beforehand. So when we get to the studio, we're ready to go. We hit the ground running. So yeah, so I get involved at that early stage, working with the director and the storyboard artist. And then once we get into production, then I'd start working with the production assistants and the different departments. So that to be storyboard department, layout departments. The layout will start placing all the different elements from a scene into the scene, I suppose. So you have all your characters, your backgrounds, your props, they put all those in. And that's like layout and scene prep. And then we go into a rough animation where it'll be kind of a very rough animation done based on the layout. And then going to clean up animation. So I'm dealing with all these different departments. As the film is, as the scenes have all been animated, I'm dealing with each and every department the whole way through. And then even when the film is finished, then we're still dealing with the post-production departments, which is not just an editor. And I mean, there's like so many more people involved in post-production.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of hard to say where I fit in because I'm the whole way through. You know what I mean? And obviously, you'll be working with to be like assistant editors and to be editors. I mean, so we're all working together. I mean, the whole way through to get it done.
And when you say there's those pockets right at the end that they're not just maybe like you're not working with the kind of creative side, there's other parts that you have to link in. Who else is in that space at the end?
At the very end.
Yeah.
Well, you're dealing with sound designers, colorists, graders. So a sound designer will take. I'll start. We have all the sound lined up in the edit. So we have a track for each character, and then we have sound effects tracks, and then we have music tracks and Atmos tracks and all that kind of stuff. So then that gets sent over then to a sound designer. That could be like 50 tracks of audio. Get sent across to a sound designer. They do all the sound design work, making it sound nice and flow very well. There'd be Foley artists who would do all the Foley, all the footsteps, the cups clinking off saucers.
And does that get done in Cartoon Saloon itself?
No, they get done in studio. So like in the studio, we'd only do the animation and the compositing ourselves. Then it goes to a sound studio then to get all the sound work done. But there's graphic designers, more animators involved in doing like titles and graphics for whatever it is, be it a show or a film. There's the whole legal department taking care of contracts, and like basically everything in the film needs to be documented as well. And I mean, so if every piece of music needs to be documented and time coded. Every time somebody speaks in a different language needs to be documented and time coded. All these things need to be kept track of the whole way through. So there's lots of different departments, or lots of different people involved in post-production, not just editors and sound designers. And
it relies a lot on the kind of communication within that. How much responsibility in your role relies on being able to translate that to other people?
It's very important. Communication is such a huge thing, especially when you're working with such a big team. Like if you're on set, it's very easy. You have a first AD there shouting, and then everyone hears it. But when you're working animation, right now, actually, we're all working at home, so communication is very important because we're not sitting in the same studio being able to like chat or whatever, or like you can't just like call a meeting and get everyone up to the crew room to watch through something and kind of go, look at this scene and how do we make this better, or how do we fix this or whatever.
Yeah.
So when you're working remotely, it is very important to stay in communication, but we're in communication with all the different departments the whole way through. Mostly I've been in communication with the director and the production people. But I need to be able to hear what the director is telling me, understand that, and then relay that on then to other departments as well, so that if the director says this scene isn't working, we need to rejig it, and whatever they mean by rejig, I have to go in and interpret that and rejig it to their spec. But then I need to send that information then back to the storyboard artist and kind of say, right, we need this character to be smiling, or need the character to be facing the other direction, and then they need to take the Chinese whisper that I passed on from the director, and they have to interpret that. So communication is very important. But luckily now with software, we're able to communicate very easily. Like there's lots of different, we use Frame.io quite a bit in the studio, so that helps us to collaborate together, so that if we do have an edit, I can share the edit then with all the directors and producers, and they can give back notes. And it's all kept together, so there's no kind of like spreadsheets or trackers or anything like that. It's all very kept together in the one area, which is great.
You'd oversee the compositing as well then?
Oh no. That's a whole different department. Like, we take into the compositing, all right. So we'd have to be in communication with them about, well, obviously making sure that all the tech spec is kept consistent throughout, you know what I mean? But yeah, no, we'd be taking in the scenes from compositing. We wouldn't be actually overseeing that. That's a whole different kettle of fish that, I don't understand some of it.
A question in here from Alice. What is the most tedious part of being an editor?
The most tedious part, I think the most tedious part for me would be getting everything set up properly. I'm a great believer in having everything organized before you start editing. The last thing you want to be doing is sitting down with the director and then looking for footage and then going, where's the shot? And you're going, I don't know where it is. So I think the most important thing, the most tedious thing is getting everything set up correctly, and so that everything is well documented. You know where all your footage is, because you could have like 40, 50 hours of video and audio that you need to be able to find straight away. So that's, I don't even know if it is the most tedious part of editing, but it is one of the most tedious parts of editing, all right. Other than that, I love everything else to do with it. Like there's a very tedious job that we do in animation called subclipping, where we take the film or the episode and we break it down into each individual shot and export that as an individual QuickTime and audio file. And some people find that very tedious, but I love it. I really enjoy the whole process, because I'm going through the film or the episode or whatever it is, and I'm also, while I'm doing the subclipping, I'm watching it, you know what I mean? I'm watching it very slowly because I'm going through it almost frame by frame, you know what I mean? So that gives me another kind of a pass at getting to grips with the project, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you have a very intimate lens of like everything that's going on.
Exactly, yeah.
Nothing passes you by.
That's hopefully nothing passes
No,
me by anyway.
unless it's happening at a very slow rate.
But then spellings do happen to pass me by quite a bit. So
Yeah.
I have been known to not spell check too often. So sometimes those little things pass me by, but we catch them usually just in time.
You were saying, because I was asking you earlier if there is a moment within all of your experience, like whether it was on set or in the editing room, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. And I think this was a crying moment.
This was a spelling mistake. Yeah, I made a spelling mistake in one of our conceptual trailers. I spelt the word transform without the S, so it was transform, and it went live on YouTube, and it was viewed and shared thousands of times. And then we got an email from someone going, "Hey, you spelled this wrong," and my heart just sank. I was like, "Oh, sugar." So yeah, that was one moment where I was laugh or cry. So we just laughed and got on with it.
Do you feel a lot of responsibility with the project when you do see things to the end, and kind of you're with and in communication with so many people to wrap up the project?
Yeah.
That if something falls through or something's not to the spec that you look for, like how do you move on from that so that it's not like all sitting on your shoulders and you're having a weep?
I don't think you ever do move on from that. Like we finished Secret of Kells, nearly 10 years ago now, and I'm still working on that. We're still sending out various versions of that, putting together clips, versions for festivals and that kind of thing. So I don't think you ever really finish on a film.
Yeah.
As long as you're alive, the film will always be following you around with stuff to be done on it. That's my experience anyway. And it's the same with TV series. Like again, Puff and Rock, we wrapped the series of Puff and Rock
congratulations.
5 years ago. Thank you.
Yeah.
And like that's still being sent out around the world. And I mean, so that's like in, I don't know how many different countries at the moment, but we're still getting requests for that. So it never ends.
Yeah.
But there is an awful lot of responsibility on the post-production people to make sure that everything's right, because you're the last kind of protocol. I mean, once it's done and locked and sent to the lab, and then the lab process the footage and send out the master version of the film or the TV series, and I mean that's it. There's no turning back, unless you have a spelling mistake, in which case you have to turn back and redo that.
Look at it again,
Yeah, so those last few weeks, I'd imagine, on a project there, incredibly stressful for you.
It certainly is. We're in the middle of it for Wolfwalkers at the moment. We have everything handed in, but we're in the last few weeks of deliverables now, so we're getting all the different bits together for different co-producers and distributors and broadcasters and that kind of stuff, so that they have the elements that they need. The problem is when you're working with different territories, there's so many different standards and formats in each country, in each territory, that you have to make loads of different versions of the one thing. So you have your one film, but you have like versions in different frame rates, different aspect ratios, different frame sizes. I mean, now that there's 2K and 4K and Dolby Vision and standard dynamic range. There's so many different, there's so many different things to keep track of.
We were talking a little bit about that earlier today, actually. And yeah, it's not as bad as it used to be, though, is it, in terms of like different frame rates and different aspect ratios? Now
That's what I thought. And then all of a sudden, everything went crazy. Because I remember back in the day, we had standard definition and we had high definition. And it was so easy to understand, you know what I mean? And you had widescreen or you had 4:3. And it was so easy. It was nice and simple. Oh, then you had PAL and NTSC, obviously. But now we have all these different frame rates, and we have. So when you're finishing a film, you might be shooting in 4K, doing your post-production in 2K, and then upracing to 4K again afterwards. You know what I mean? So there's all these different resolutions and frame rates to keep track of, and it's great crack.
I forgot about NTSC. That's like 30 frames per second, of course, isn't it?
2997, just to make things really confusing. And then there's the 23976, which is the standard for like the streamers, but 24 is the standard for theaters, and there's just a little bit.
Do you get this all tattooed onto your body to be like?
It's inside my eyelid, so I can remember it. But I don't remember it all. I mean, you have to keep reminding yourself. You have to keep kind of practicing and learning about. Like I do an awful lot of reading. At lunchtime, every lunchtime, I sit down and I read blogs about digital video or post-production, and you have to do that. You have to kind of keep yourself up to date with what's going on.
Yeah, fair play.
So do you have to export out like a 30 frames per second version, or is that's like on you?
Well, no, we produce the master, and then the lab would do all the different various versions. But if it is something that's being done in-house, because we don't do an awful lot of online in-house, but we would for smaller little things. When we do that, then we would have to be adhering to all these different frame rates and standards.
And through the laborious selection of different things you have to take on.
But I love it. You know what I mean? It's all very exciting for me, so I don't mind it at all.
Okay. So a question from Cam: how is editing animation different than editing live action?
Well, the first thing would be for animation, as I said, we start the editing process beforehand. And the beauty of editing animation as well is not only are the different elements in the scene visually, you can move them around independently of each other, but the same with the audio, because each actor would record their lines in the studio separately. You have all these different tracks of audio, so you're able to really manipulate the scene, whereas with live action, what you shoot is what you get, unless you want to go and do ADR afterwards, which I'm sure will be done anyway, but like, you're kind of more restricted, I think, with live action. With animation, you have a lot more scope to improve things or to make things flow better. Also with animation, I think editing animation is a bit more technical than editing live action.
Yeah.
With live action, I suppose the editor is focused on getting the right cut and the right frame, using the right transition, taking the right take. With animation, you don't usually get takes from the storyboard artist. You have a take of a scene, you know what I mean? You don't have like various different options of, the character walking in different ways or different things happening within the scene. You have different takes of the audio, all right, but so you're dealing with one take. You're not dealing with multiple takes of visual content or of the video. So that'd be another major difference. But I think the fact that you have it all edited beforehand is the big thing, and then you're adding. So as different stages of animation are done, or different processes are done, you're adding those into the timeline. So you start off with a bed of animatic, which is just rough storyboard, and then after a few weeks then you start getting little dots of animation being peppered out throughout the animatic. Then you get clean animation, start getting the color stuff then as well, and then the combat. So it's great to be able to kind of see it. You really the editor in animation really gets to see the film come to life. You know what I mean? You can see it from its infancy starting to grow, whereas with live action, I don't know. As much as I loved editing live action, I much prefer editing animation.
Sorry. Would there be many changes then, like to the animatic?
Yeah.
Before animation begins? Or
right up until comp is finished, we'd be making changes. So like it's like sometimes when you edit the animatic, you might only have like a movement every 12 frames or every second or every 2 seconds, depending on how detailed the animatic is. So then when you actually get into animation, you might see that stuff isn't cut and right because you actually have a flow of movement within the scene. In animation as well, what you call a shot in live action is a scene in animation, and what you call a scene in live action would be a sequence in animation. Just to add more confusion to everything.
Is already bamboozled.
I'll send you a glossary later on, don't worry. But yeah, so when you're where was I going with this again? Sorry.
You were starting to dissect the animatic there about layering pieces of information together.
Yeah, when you're bringing it, when you're getting in the various scenes, I can't remember what I was about to say there.
About changes, I think, in the animatic.
Changes up to the last second. That was it. Yeah, sorry. We'd be making changes throughout all stages. So most changes will be made during the storyboarding and animatic stage. Once we get into animation, then as I said, you'd start seeing movement. So then once you start seeing movement, you'll see that movement between two scenes isn't working. And each scene will be worked on by a different animator. So animator A doesn't necessarily see what animator B is working on. So they don't see that the character ended with their hand up here, you know what I mean? And you would have an animation supervisor telling people, look, this is what we need you to do. Start here, end here kind of thing. But they wouldn't see the flow. They wouldn't see the flow from one scene to the next. So then when it gets to the edit suite, then we can actually kind of go, okay, this isn't really working. Can we bring this action 3 frames earlier or bring this action a frame later? It's like little minute details like that we're actually able to manipulate. and then you'd see that stuff starts flowing much better. One thing I learned when I was starting out in animation, I had a great teacher called Joe Fitzpatrick. This was back when I started in Cartoon Saloon. He was teaching me how to edit animation, and he was always saying, for the dialogue, never have the dialogue within 6 frames of a cut. So you'd have, this is for like children's animation, so that's not kind of like, I know like in adult animation, like Family Guy and those kind of things, they'll have dialogue bridging the cuts everywhere. But that was something that also stood out for me, was that when you're working with animation, that, you know, it's such a very precise technical thing when you're editing animation that you kind of have to stick to that, you know what I mean? And kind of,
Yeah.
but as I said, I mean, like when you are dealing with the various stages, I mean, yeah, you will be making changes halfway through. Sorry, that was a very long-winded way of saying yes. So
no,
yes.
it's important, yeah. And especially the kind of mechanics of it. And I suppose to translate across how important it is, that constant manipulation, that nothing is concrete the whole way through.
The whole way through, yeah. Like even when you get to comp, you'll be still moving characters. Sorry, comp is compositing. Sorry, I should have explained that as well. Compositing.
You're using this shorthand like you're an animator,
willy-nilly.
my God.
So compositing is when you get all the various elements. So you have the background, the characters, the props, foreground elements, and they layer them all up. They put in like camera moves, focusing, lighting effects, all that kind of stuff, just to make it look more real. So that when you do look at the animation in the background and it's all layered up, it does look very like separated. But the comp seems to just kind of bring it all together and make it kind of seem like it's all part of the one shot.
Was ever a role at the start when you were starting to learn more about that editing process, that like, was there a role within the production line where you're like, how do they do that? Was there one that just like confused you or bamboozled you from your experience in live action?
Yeah, I never learned how to use After Effects, which has always been my great regret. So any editors out there learn After Effects, just get a basic idea, a basic understanding of it. So that was always one thing that really kind of, I was always very in awe of, seeing people work with After Effects and do compositing. I'm like, that's witchcraft to me, you know?
Yeah. There's another question here. Would you say editing lets you be very creative, or are there a lot of restrictions you have to follow?
Be very creative, I suppose. It depends on the project as well. If you're dealing with like advertising or episodical TV stuff, you're very restricted that everything has to be a certain length. You have a certain number of frames to work with. You can't be 1 frame over or 1 frame under. It needs to be exactly this number of frames. So that can be not restrictive, but I suppose it makes you think more about what you have to do. But yeah, no, overall, it is very creative.
Because I thought even with what Alice was saying there, was with the restrictions, you learn how to be more creative.
Absolutely,
almost.
yeah. You kind of, well, necessity is the mother of invention, so you have to try and figure out, if you only have 6 frames to fit in an action, you'll figure out how to do that, you know what I mean? You'll find some way of squeezing that action in there.
And we might jump on to the clip that you've brought to show us today. Could you inform us of any important things that you want the young people to look out for, or that you think will be important for them to spot through?
I'm trying to remember the clip. It's been a week since I watched that clip.
It's very cool. We're all very impressed.
I think the first bit is just me talking through the animation process on Puffin Rock. Actually, there's a trailer for Puffin. There's a trailer for the Cartoon Saloon showreel, first of all, actually.
Yes.
It shows some of the work that I would have worked on over the years. And then there's a trailer for Puffin Rock, just to kind of give people an idea, because I'm sure most people will be a little bit old for Puffin Rock, but that was the most recent project that I finished. That was a Cartoon Saloon project.
Yeah.
So that would be, so just kind of give you an idea about how we worked on that.
Yeah, and we can all be amazed by your work. We
yeah,
might throw
hopefully.
on that clip.
Phew! It's a scorching hot day on Puffin Rock. Everywhere is bursting with sounds of summer. Birds singing, bees buzzing, puffins laughing.
Let's go on an owl hunt. Freddy.
What's that?
They're here. Follow me. Stars, stars, stars. Squawk. Come and play on a little island. If you look, you'll see we'll be here. Come rain or shine, in the sky or the deep blue ocean, on the beach or meadow, always fun. Come rain or shine, Puffin Rock. Ba-ba-boo.
Hi, my name is Alan and I'm the editor on Puffin Rock. I'm going to show you how I cut the episodes together. This is the software we use to edit. It's called Final Cut Pro. And what I do is I take in the storyboard from the storyboard artist. You can see that's the blue track up here. That's all the video that I received in.
Yay! Oof! 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 Again!
And the green tracks down here are the various audio tracks. So there's an audio track for each character. For example, the narrator is on top, then we have Una, then we have Baba, and then all the secondary characters down the way. And at the bottom down we have some sound effects. The sound effects are just there to help the animators, like so if somebody drops something or if somebody jumps, we'll have the sound of them landing on the ground and so on, just so it's easier to animate too.
Whoopsie-daisy!
I time out the storyboard, slow down some bits, speed up other bits just to make it match the dialogue. And when that's done, then that goes off to be animated. And when it comes back into me then, I get final animated scenes. So you can see the storyboards are all in black and white, just kind of basic line drawings with a little bit of color. And the final animation is in full color. And all I do then is basically layer up the final animation on top of the storyboard, which is then called an animatic when it's edited. And then we have a final episode.
Yes! In here!
Puffins 1, Seagull 0.
Yes!
Now we are back. Could you bring us through? There was a couple of kind of standout points there from your spelling mistake accidentally, your timeline, which you said wasn't you, but it just shows the kind of in-depth intricacies of the editing.
Yeah, the Wolfwalkers timeline there, that was worked on by, there was 4 editors working on that. There was myself and Richie Cody, who's ex-Young Irish Filmmakers as well.
I love Richie. He always wins at table quizzes. Though,
He does, doesn't he?
It's so bad.
Such a smart chap.
But yes.
And then there was Dara Byrne, who also worked in Filmmakers years ago, and Darren Holmes, who works an awful lot with Cartoon Saloon on like consulting on editing and that kind of thing. So there wasn't just one person involved in editing that timeline. There was a whole load of us, a whole team of people.
Yeah.
But other things that were in there was I had a card with just software on it. So I kind of listed out the software that I'm using in the studio any given day. So for my editing, I use Avid mostly. That's my go-to. Well, I won't say it's my go-to editor. Final Cut Pro is my go-to editor. Avid is my kind of like, that's the one we use in-house for all our big projects. But like I'd say to anyone who wants to learn or wants to get into editing, learn how to use Premiere, Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, and Avid. If you can get a good understanding, even just how to open them up, import a project and export something, just get the basics in all of them, but then focus on the one that you really like. But I'd say if you want to get into editing, learn Avid. That is the main NLE. If you want to get a job in Hollywood or anywhere big like that, Avid is the only editor that they'll be using. So
yeah, and
it's free. You can get a free version of that from the Avid website. So
cool.
There's no excuse for anybody. You can get Resolve for free from the Blackmagic Design website. You can get Avid for free from their website. So I'd say to anyone, download them, learn them.
And you're not being sponsored to say
Not being sponsored by either of them. That's the thing, like Final Cut Pro is my favorite NLE. NLE is a non-linear editing system. So Final Cut Pro is the one that if I want to do something quickly, I'll go to Final Cut Pro, I'll get it done really quickly. If I want something really high quality, I'll go to Final Cut Pro. If I want to do something that's big and long and that's collaborating with different people, different departments, different studios, then I use Avid because that's the one that's kind of most, has most collaboration.
I know Cartoon Saloon do quite a lot with different studios all over the place.
Yeah.
Is that difficult from an editing standpoint, but also post-production? What is the challenges that you have to overcome? Because you've done it, so what kind of are the tactics to it?
I suppose the challenges will be making sure that you have one. If you have different editors in different parts of the world or even different parts of Kilkenny like we have at the moment, the important thing is to have one master edit that you're working on, and then so that you're not like 3 different people working on the same edit at the same time, and then you have to try and get somebody to try and pick where are the new bits of this and and make a brand new Frankenstein's monster out of all the different edits. So keeping track of things is very important. That was the question, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
just making sure. Thanks.
And a master edit as well, because I presume when it's a focused project towards the end. So the ability of having like a piece of work that everybody's inputting to that we know is like the final, because I presume it goes through versions. Oh,
absolutely, yeah. For Wolfwalkers alone, so we exported 109 different versions of the full film. That was going, so basically when we had the first pass of storyboard done, Richie at the time, or sorry, it was Dara at the time, he done an export, so that was the first export. And then as various processes were finished, like animation or comp were finished, they get dropped in and then we'd be doing more exports. So we're doing, we have there's 109 exports, 110 exports will be Monday or Tuesday, we'll be doing the 110th one. So
holy mother of Lord.
There are so different versions to keep track of. And then sometimes the director will say, listen, I love that version, or I love that the way you had that scene cut in version 63. Can we go back to that again? And you have to go back through all your files and you have to put it in. So keeping everything organized, like having a master edit project that is so well backed up is very important. And then you have all the kind of the peripheral projects are feeding into that then. So
I know this is a silly question, but where do they all go? Like where in is the hub that you keep so many edits, and where does that live?
When we're working in the studio, we have a system that's called Nexus. It's the Avid Nexus. So that's a shared hard drive. I suppose it's just a big giant hard drive that's shared among all the editors. But we're working in, there's 3 different buildings in Kilkenny for the studio. So any editor in any building can dial into that one hard drive and edit from that. So it's a really high spec, high speed piece of equipment that costs thousands. But it's been great. I mean, it's been very handy for us because like, it works with Final Cut, Premiere and everything. I mean, so it means that if I'm in my building and Richie's in his building or no one's in his building, we can all be kind of looking at the same footage and open the same project. Not at the same time, obviously, but you know, we all have access to the same stuff. So yeah, so that's where it lives. But then we have backups. So if I'm in this building and Richie's in this building, his backups get done in my building and my backups get done in his building. You know what I mean? So that we always have off-site backups as well. So it's very well. If God forbid, if one building burnt down, we'd have everything in the other building. Touch felt.
Like a question one, how is it that you're able to curate something like that with so many people? And also, would you have any tips for people? It's like a very practical thing of having a project and working on it collaboratively. Say if the young people go off and they work on something together, it like to do with like maybe file etiquette or anything like that, all that practical advice that you learned through the years. Do you have any tips for that and working on a project together?
Yeah. First thing, file naming is very important.
Yes.
Consistency in file naming is so important. Like I try and have like the project names. We usually have abbreviations for projects. We have the project abbreviation, the stage of production is in, be it animatic or comp or whatever. I mean, they have that in the name. The frame rate, the resolution. They're the important things to have in there, I suppose. Own a version number and a date. Dates are so important, so you can tell when things were created, because sometimes they don't keep the creative date. It might kind of have a modified date and you don't know when things were done. So yeah, keep everything dated. Just consistency is so important in file naming. Another thing as well is don't take shortcuts when you're trying to organize things. There are no shortcuts in post-production. Well, you can take shortcuts all you want, but they'll come back and they'll haunt you for the rest of the project, because you know, if you want to do something, sit down, spend time doing the meticulous, tedious jobs at the start, get it all organized, get all your footage in, have it all transcoded to the same frame rate, to the same resolution, to the same codec. So that means then that when you're editing, there's no issues, you know what I mean, with stuff getting messed up or, I don't know, files not working in different systems and that kind of thing. You keep everything organized from the start.
And backed up.
And backed up. So well backed up. But then also then having a master edit, not having two master edits, because then you're in trouble. Then you have to try and, that happened to me once actually. I was editing an animatic and then we got in a new version of it. So I was like, okay, scrap that one, start a new version. But I started on the older version again. Got the whole thing put together, sent it over to the production, and I got an email from Quiva and she was saying, Alan, this doesn't seem right. We need to look at this again. So things like that, I mean, you have to be organized.
Yeah.
Because things will come back and they'll haunt you, as I said.
How long did it take you to do that piece of work that when you
realized?
realized?
About 2 days work put into it. But luckily Quiva spotted it and she was like, hey, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is the wrong shot.
No.
Yeah. So
and it happens on a very practical note. Like I know in films in here, like we'll go be like, oh, like this one's called, I know, The Marriage Story, Final Edit. And we're like, okay, cool, we'll open the final edit. And then it's not the final edit.
That's another thing I'd say. Never call anything final, ever. Because if you do, you'll have final 1, final 2, final. So don't, if you do, you're just jinxing yourself. You know? If you want to keep working on something, call it final, and then you'll be guaranteed to get back more notes. But then sometimes, if you're dealing with a client, sometimes if you say final on something, that will make them stop coming back to you for more things as well. So
there you go.
It's a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? So
there you are. You have your
be careful when you use final, you know what I mean? You have to be very specific.
It's a delicate balance.
Absolutely, yeah.
A lot of our young people are curious as regards to their journey from finishing school and going into animation. And I know you took a kind of a bigger approach in going into kind of a broader sector of things rather than specializing in animation. Do you have any advice from your journey or any learning curves that have helped to where you are now?
I suppose, yeah, because I started off with live action was my thing that I wanted to do. Will I talk about my journey?
Yeah.
So I started off, I was a member of Young Irish Filmmakers, and then when I did my leaving cert, I took a year out actually, and we worked on The Boys. I don't know if you've seen that. Great crack. Actually, Under the Hawthorn Tree and The Boys are two of my favourite things that I've ever worked on because I learned so much doing them. So I'd say, that was my first part of my journey, is getting out there and just shooting something and editing it. That was very important. So I went to college, I studied TV and media production with a focus on, we did digital animation, multimedia and digital animation as part of that as well. So that was good because it kind of gave me a good understanding of digital formats, because when I was here in Filmmakers, we were dealing with analog video primarily. We had a film camera, that one there behind me, an analog video camera, which is actually in the office up on the wall. And then eventually we got a DVC Pro camera. But like, it was very important for me to learn how digital video worked and digital audio worked, and even learning how like applications like Director and Flash and all these kind of things worked. Now, I'm not using them now, but it all stood to me. I mean, like everything you learn in digital production will stick with you no matter what department you're in, you know what I mean? So even if you're working in, say, production management, if you have an understanding of post-production, it'll come in very handy. So that was good for me in my journey, that I got different experience in so many different areas. Like even in Filmmakers, I was on the catering department at one stage. So I was making sandwiches for Under the Hawthorn Tree, and that was great because I was learning about how that worked. And I was learning about how budgets and scheduling worked because of that, you know what I mean? So that I knew that if my sandwiches were late on set, that held up the production, you know what I mean? So it was good. Basically, no matter what you're learning, it's all going to come in handy. It'll all feed into your skills, into your kind of transferable skills. Is that the word to use? Transferable skills? There we go.
Yeah, you have the lingo.
Thank you very much. So then I went on from college and I came back to Young Irish Filmmakers, and I was working here for a couple of years doing the National Youth Film School. So we did projects like The Children, Steal Away, Lily's Bad Day, those kind of things. And that was great, again, because I was still learning more.
Yeah.
Then I was seeing what guys in Curtin Saloon were doing, and I was kind of very interested in kind of like getting involved with them. So I just hung around until they eventually gave me something to do. I just kept going, hey, give me something to do.
Yeah.
I got a job working with them then on Skunk Fu, which is the first series that they made, and I went in there as an assistant editor and started learning the skills of assistant editing in animation. And that for me was a whole learning curve, because I was coming from taking in DV and DVC Pro tapes, capturing them into a system and editing them. Then I was given this folder of an image of TIFF, or a folder of TIFF sequences, a folder of TIFF images, and told, okay, now there's your footage. I'm like, how do I work with this? I mean, I didn't have a clue about image sequences, so I had to learn all that stuff. So it was a bit of a learning curve. And then once Skunk Fu wrapped up, then I was at a bit of a loose end. I was an editor in Kilkenny, which had no real kind of like production companies, and I had nothing to edit, so I bought a camera, and myself and my friend John started shooting things. And we worked on this thing called Vultures, which is that and Under the Hawthorn Tree are the two things I'm most proud of, because they were so low budget and so full of learning opportunities. And I think it was good to kind of teach us all how to work under pressure with no money and on our own. Because there was days when we were shooting, Vultures was a web series that we made. So we made 3 seasons of that, 2 live action and then 1 was a radio play. But when we're working on that, it might have been me doing camera, lights and sound on my own and clapperboard, and then there'd be actors in the scene, and then if the actors weren't acting, I'd grab them and then make them do sound. I mean, so it was a great kind of way to learn.
Absolutely.
So I think anyone that wants to get into it, just kind of keep doing things, just keep shooting things, keep editing things, learn how to use all the different types of software. And that's what I was doing basically all along. I was just kind of picking up new skills in different departments, in different areas, and it all feeds in, I mean.
Absolutely, to what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And what do you think is the best advice for, say, young animators that might be going for, say, internships, traineeships, work experience? of that time when you went in, going back to when you were a trainee editor and you were going in, what was important for you, or did you feel was important for the role? Whether it's like being curious, asking questions, what advice would you give to your younger self going into a position that you don't have the experience for?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Even to this day, I'm still kind of looking at things and going, oh, I don't understand that. How do I? And then going on Google trying to figure it out. But like, just ask somebody.
Google.
There's always somebody who will know. And I mean, like, they mightn't be working directly with you, but somebody that you know might know somebody who understands the thing that you need to understand. So, yeah, ask questions. Don't be afraid to figure out how things work. Experiment with things. Like, when I was starting on animation, actually, because I was trying to get my head around different frame rates and different resolutions and all that kind of thing, I was making videos that were 24 frames per second of a ball moving across the screen, bring it into different timelines, to different frame rates to see what happens when I play it back at a different frame rate, or if I try to force it to a different frame rate. So just experimenting with video and audio and but sorry, for portfolio into things, I couldn't really speak from an animator or an artist point of view because that wasn't really my end of things. But from an editing point of view, just get experience learning. I think the first thing that an employer will look for is that you have experience using certain types of software, because different studios have their software that they use. So like Brown Bag use Premiere for editing, Cartoon Saloon uses Avid for editing, and I mean, so that if they can see that you have the skills that they require in that studio, that's very important. So I'd say learn all the NLEs you can, build a portfolio of different types of work, so that if you have some animation, music video, live events, short films, clips from your web series, whatever you want. And I mean, that's so important just to have a variety of footage and a variety of work and a variety of software that you can use. Absolutely,
to show your skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even like there's other things like, even though I'm editing, I'm still using things like Pro Tools for doing little bits of sound design, using Photoshop, using Illustrator. I'm using a little bit of everything, and I'm learning how to use After Effects after all these years. And I mean, I'm getting my head around it bit by bit. But it is so important. I mean, if you have those skills, they'll really stand to you going into the career.
Do you think it's possible to kind of work your way into a position like that, like these days with the amount of stuff that's out there, like Animation Skill Net, for example, or training courses like that, without having to necessarily go straight through like third level?
I'm sure, yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I don't know if places require third level, like a diploma or a degree. Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I don't know that now. I'm sorry, I can't. But you know, I would be under the impression that people would be looking at your skills and your experience more so than your formal training, because anyone can do a course and, you know, skip their way through it and come out with, you know, a decent grade. But like, if you can prove that you can do the work, if you can prove that,
just not talk the talk, but actually
yeah,
walk
show
the walk.
Show the show, walk the walk. That makes more sense. Yeah, it looks like, prove that you can do what it is you say you can do, and that'll always stand to you. Like, people will look at you as a person and your skills more so than your piece of paper, I would think.
Absolutely.
I'd hope anyway.
Yeah, there's a question in here, because I know we're coming towards the end. When did you realise that you liked editing, or it was like your passion?
I actually remember the thing I was working on. I was working on a promo video for here, actually.
Really?
So yeah, we had all this footage shot, and we were having a launch, and we just wanted to kind of, you know, showcase the studio, or showcase young Irish filmmakers. And I was up in the edit suite at about, must have been about maybe 2:30 in the morning one night. I remember my mother was there, Mike Kelly was there, all these different people were around, all these different kind of like adults, and then there's a few of us kids trying to work away to get this thing edited. That was the moment I realized this is what I love doing. Just sitting there, and I mean, drinking a cup of tea at like 2:30 in the morning, trying to get a shot to work, and with 2 VHS players, you know, side by side. And then I realized this is great crack.
This is what you want to do.
Yeah.
And for something, I'd say it's such a unique sense of pride, where like an actor might watch a performance and be like, oh, look at me go. And everybody can uniquely identify with that. But with you, it's like you'll see a piece of work and you might have maybe turned character or changed the way a dialogue is presented in a scene. How do you feel, or for an editor to have your work shown, is that pride different, or?
Yeah, no, I'm always proud of, I love, when we're showing stuff that I've worked on, I love watching people's reactions to it. So like, if we're watching, be it an episode or a film or whatever, I'll sit in the audience, I'll be watching people's faces and seeing when they laugh, where they laugh. And this all helps me as well, because when I go on to the next project and I know, okay, that didn't work in this project, on the main, so I won't be doing that joke again or trying to do this again. I mean, but yeah, no, I do get an awful great sense of pride watching back over acting. But then again, with the editor, you don't notice the work. You're not supposed to notice the editor's job. You know what I mean? So
it's not supposed to seem. It's the same with the script writer. You're not supposed to. They're not supposed to see their own words. It's supposed to be
transparent. I mean, completely. But yeah, no, I do take great pride in.
You do, for the most obvious of reasons.
Well, pride and fame and money, of course.
From everybody here at Filmmakers, we just want to say a huge, huge thank you, Alan, for your time.
No problem at all.
The knowledge you've imparted, and the time you've taken out your day to help us understand the post-production world.
I'm happy to be here.
And thank you from everybody in Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All we have to do now is wave goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.